Okay, welcome to the On Your Side podcast. I am Gary Harper, and I'm joined by Colin Stanton, my producer. How you doing today, Colin?
I'm good.
I appreciate you being here.
Sure.
And
I'm not Susan.
You are not Susan. A little bit more of a husky voice.
A little bit, yes.
Not quite as attractive.
No, I'll accept that, yeah.
Yeah, and just so our listeners all know, Susan had her baby.
Yeah.
She had a
Monday.
beautiful baby girl.
Yes.
And this will make 3 for Susan.
Yes.
So she's an old pro at this, right?
She is. She's very good. I'm jealous of the baby's hair.
Yes.
Big,
That's a crop,
thick
right?
mop of hair
That
there.
is a
Yeah.
lot of hair. So anyway, congratulations to her and her husband. And we'll see her maybe, hopefully, when she comes back from maternity leave. You know, she may be staying home and go, I kind of like this staying home thing.
It probably looks pretty good after a while, yeah.
Yeah, right?
Unless you hit like 2 or 3 months and think, I got to get out of here.
I'm going
I
crazy.
want to talk to an adult.
I remember those days.
Yes,
Hey,
vividly.
Hey, listen, today on the On Your Side podcast, Colin, as you know, we're talking about cell phone usage and screen time. And I think a lot of people are guilty of this. They just can't seem to put their phone down. And when they do, they just have to go back and pick it up. I'm guilty of this sometimes. How about you?
I mean, just sitting here, we both have cell phones sitting here on the table in front of us. I've got another one because this is my work phone. I've got a personal that's down on my desk. I'm sure when we're done here, the first thing I'm going to do without even thinking is pick it up and look and see if I got a text or anything on my phone.
I feel really weird. I'll leave my cell phone at my desk and I'll have to go back to check on editing just to see what's going on. And then I'll realize I don't have my phone on me. And then I have to go back to my desk because I just feel like it's like, wearing shoes.
It's a weirdly naked feeling. Which is funny because we're both old enough that we grew up without them.
Right.
So we're perfectly functional through college without having a cell phone.
Right.
And now
we've been ruined.
Yes,
or
exactly.
we've ruined ourselves, one or the other. So listen, there's some new information saying that we're not the only ones. I guess there's a lot of people out there who just can't seem to let their phone be. For more information on that and some interesting data, we're talking to Kyle Beierlein. He's with Hosting Advice, and he joins us on the On Your Side podcast. Mr. Beierlein, how are you today, sir?
Psyched. Just happy to be here. Good day so far, and looking forward to talking to you guys.
Yeah, you're joining us from New York, right?
Yep, that is correct.
Yeah, and I found out the hard way that I knew you were 3 hours different time zone from us, but I went the wrong way. I did it later instead of earlier, so I'm glad you had a flexible schedule.
That happens to the best of us. I actually made the same exact mistake this morning.
Okay.
So, no worries.
All right, good. So I don't feel so bad then. Hey, Hosting Advice just released some really interesting data when it comes to screen time. Tell me, first of all, why? Why did you guys want to tackle screen time and how much time people spend on the phone? Just tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. So at Hosting Advice, we're kind of interested in all things tech, primarily web hosting advice, how-to guides, things like that. But like I said, our interest lies kind of in tech in all facets. And as you guys were talking about earlier, our increase in mobile device usage is just getting kind of out of hand. And as we're on our phones more and more, people need to be more aware of how to kind of reach users on their phones. So we decided to go to the source and find out just kind of how much people are using their phones, what they're using them for, and just kind of try to get a good idea of what how many minutes it is of our time that we're kind of wasting away on our screens.
Yeah, let's just jump right into that. And I like to have Arizona #1 on the list in a lot of categories, but this is one list I'm not really proud of. According to your research and data, Arizonans are the #1 when it comes to screen usage. We're on the phone more than any other state.
And it wasn't by a super tight margin either. It was actually one of the wider gaps that we saw in our study. So it's like you said, Arizona, average of 8 hours and 50 minutes on the phone. Next was Washington at 8 hours and 17. So that's a pretty substantial jump there from 1 to 2. But I'll go ahead and say I don't think it's all negative for Arizona. We're using our phones for everything, entertainment, work, things like that. I think you could have used this as a way of Arizonans, maybe they're the hardest working bunch, you know what I mean? And they can't get away from their phones because they got to stay connected all the time.
Yeah, well, that's a nice backhanded compliment, I guess. We have to work, but that's okay.
I mean, do you guys see a pattern in the states that are really bad, really spend a lot of time versus the states that spend lesser time? Because that seems like a ridiculous gap there between, I mean, is it so hot we don't go outside and do anything else, or?
I mean, I think climate can play a role in all sorts of these things potentially. But we actually did see a pretty strong concentration in the Southwest. Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas were all in the top 6 states when it comes to screen time. And we don't have a ton of answers, I guess, directly beyond that, but just with the way that we're using our phones now from entertainment, it's like a third screen for many people. So maybe people are spending less time, watching TV. Maybe there's like a fewer people in the house and they have to kind of, segment themselves with their entertainment and they're on their phones a little bit more in the southwestern states.
What are we doing on our phones? What's gobbling up all the screen time? Are we gaming? Are we, what are we doing?
Yeah, so based on our study, it's a little bit of everything, to be honest with you. I mean, looking across the board, the biggest category in every state when we asked about screen time was social activity. So time on TikTok is obviously a big one, but even scrolling through Instagram, people on Twitter, these are all different social platforms that kind of popped up in our study when we asked people about like their found out what their top apps used were. We also saw Safari there, so it's just like a lot of internet scrolling also. But then beyond that, you see things like YouTube, where people are just kind of going and consuming content. I think that this study really kind of sheds a lot of light on the fact that, a few decades ago it was just communication, and then over the last 10 years it was more work, and now it's people are spending a lot of time on their phones for entertainment, and consuming content pretty much every hour of the day.
And when we say screen time, we're talking screen time. We're talking about not just our smartphones, but iPads and everything else that goes along with it, right?
Well, so our study specifically asked about mobile screen time.
Oh.
So this is just mobile screen time, but based on kind of inferences we can make from other studies, that would also lead to increased screen time in other facets also.
Not a big surprise with social media because everybody has, with the exception of me. I don't have Facebook, but a lot of people use their phone just to see what's going on. They got to log on to Facebook. It's called X now, formerly known as Twitter. Yeah. They like to see what's going on. So
yeah, it's a news source for everyone now.
It is a news source. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So what day of the week do you see most people using? Because I think Arizona's a little different. You had us down as Monday as the biggest day. Is that typical?
No. So there was not typical, no. The biggest day of the week for the U.S. nationally was Sunday, followed by Friday, and then Monday was third. But so you see across the board, Sunday was a pretty big day for most of the states in our study, but Arizona did deviate a little bit from that on Mondays. Saturday and Wednesday are the 2 days that people are spending the least amount of time on their phones, according to our research. Saturday by a fair bit, which I think can kind of make a lot of sense. Saturday you're actually going to go ahead and unplug and maybe spend some time with real people for a change.
Hey, what about some of the mental baggage that comes with this? Do you know anything about that with people being on their screen time as much as they are? What kind of mental downfalls are there?
Yeah, based on our research, the kind of like the biggest two things that we asked about were just how people feel about how it affects their mental health in general, and then also their sleep. So we found that over half of Americans believe that using their mobile phone within an hour before bed is kind of negatively impacting their sleep, which can obviously have big impacts throughout the day. But even still, over 60% of people say that they are regularly using their phone an hour before bedtime. So it's just like being unable to unplug is kind of causing some issues there. And then when it comes to mental health, just kind of as a whole, almost 3 in 4 Americans believe that more screen time leads to negative mental health impacts kind of holistically. And for younger Americans, that number jumps up to 84%. So it's a bit interesting because we're spending more and more time on our phones, but we seem to be very cognizant of the fact that that might not always be the best thing for us.
Are we wanting to take a break and get away from the screen time, but we just can't? Or did some of your respondents say that they do as much as they can to do get away from the phone, or can they?
Yeah, so that's a tough one. Based on our survey, there was a fair bit of people who said that they are taking steps to limit their screen time. Even more people said that they want to, but it's not something that they're actively doing. It just seems to be something that like I said, that people know is something that they kind of want to do less of, but it seems like they might be struggling about how to exactly, just because with so much of our time spent online, from reading the news, like I said, working oftentimes after hours, going through, like, staying connected with people that you know. Like, there's a big social aspect here to this too, but it seems like we want to spend less and less time on our phones, and people are trying, but it's getting tough.
Yeah, and the numbers seem to just get worse and worse. I know you broke it down at something like up 400% in the last 10 years. I would assume some of that is based on more people having smartphones than they did 10 years ago. But also, I mean, that's just turned into a giant time suck that's getting worse for people. Is that because of things like TikTok that are newer and just eat up time? Do you have any idea why it's getting so much worse?
I mean, honestly, I think as people are developing more and more tools online and entertainment options for mobile, we all just know that it's something that we have with us 24/7. It's easiest to reach people where they are, and where they are is kind of where their phones are. So as more things are catered to mobile devices, we're going to use them more and more often. And then at that point, it's kind of up to the individual to take their own steps, set their own screen time limits, whether that be within their phone settings, or just kind of by themselves say, after 8 p.m. I'm not getting back on it. Those are kinds of things that the users are going to have to do themselves, and kind of get back to interacting with people.
Some of the states that were at the bottom of the list, and these are people who had the least amount of screen time. Number one, Kansas, about 5.5 hours worth of screen time. Maine, about the same amount. Nebraska, a little over 5 hours and 43 minutes. Minnesota, and then Massachusetts. So what's going on in these states? People busy out there? They don't have time for their smartphones?
Yeah, that is a phenomenal question, and it's tough to say exactly. We don't see quite the geographic trend with the limited screen time as we do with the increased screen time. Like I said, it's not heavily concentrated, but there is a Southwest kind of. When you look at it on a heat map, the Southwest seems to be on their phones a little bit more. But when it comes to not as much screen time, it's a little bit spread out, and I don't have a great answer for that, except that we also asked about how often, like the number of times that people are picking up their phones per day. And that number, by the way, just so we're all, it's roughly around 108, which is pretty staggering in itself. But in these kind of states that are spending less time on their phones, their number of pickups are higher than other states. So it's almost like they're picking up their phone more often, but they're spending less time on it per pickup, which we didn't ask directly about this, but you can kind of inference there that they might be using it for more micro sorts of reasons on their phone.
Yeah, that's kind of an upside down statistic. I mean, they're picking up their phone more, but they're actually on their phone less. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah,
how that
3 hours less than Arizona.
Isn't that
but
weird?
Picking it up more often.
Yeah, and I guess I could see maybe the Southwest, kind of the hotter states. I mean, we don't want to go outside maybe, and so we're inside and we're just navigating around on the phone and everything.
Yeah.
Hey, Kyle, personal question. You're in the digital world. What are you guilty of with screen time? What is your most popular, so to speak, place that you go to on your screen time?
Yeah. So for me, like I said, all things tech and content here at Hosting Advice. So my numbers are a little bit on the higher side here. But the places that I'm spending most of my time are, this shouldn't shock anyone. This is going to be on social platforms. Always trying to stay on top of current events.
Yeah.
Don't want to miss anything. A bit of a fear of missing out, I think, is fair to say.
Are you a TikTok guy?
I do. I hesitate to say yes. I'm a TikTok guy. I do have TikTok, and I will scroll through there. I like to kind of see what's going on.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily where all of my time is
spent.
spent.
It's not your go-to for just kind of like chilling for a little while.
And it's astonishing how much time you can spend on TikTok without realizing.
That's what they call the wormhole. Once you get in there, you can't get off. You just keep going to the next video, the next video, the next video.
And then I'll think, you should stop. You're spending too much time here. And then another half hour has gone by.
Yes. It's like, where did the time go?
Yeah.
Hey, interestingly enough, as you know, Colin, I took a vacation last week. I took 5 days, went down to beautiful Mexican beach, got some sun. and I purposely left my phone. I took the phone with me, but I turned it off. Now, there were two reasons I did that. Number one, I didn't want to get some kind of like crazy international roaming bill that I wasn't aware of. The other one is I just wanted some peace and relaxation, so I turned it off. It was off probably like 90% of the time. I turned it on every once in a while and check emails. But, boy, my head was clear. I wasn't so cloudy.
Sounds really nice.
It's like,
But how many people were there on the beach just scrolling through their phones the whole time?
It's sickening.
Yeah.
It is sickening. Today I was out in the field and stopped for a little potty break at a gas station. Go inside the restroom, and the guy is on TikTok at the urinal. I'm like, come on, man. Really? There's times and places you
watching a video, not making one.
You can't. Really? You don't.
Yeah, you don't need to put the phone away.
Put the phone away.
Well,
that kind of goes to show how much of a problem we have with screen time. All right, Kyle, hey, thanks so much for being on the On Your Side podcast. I hate to end the podcast on that negative bathroom story, but I was astonished when I walked in. I'm like, oh my God, that's why we're having a podcast on this today. He's the example. He's doing the bathroom deed while he's on his phone. Incredible. Kyle, if people want to find out more about you or, of course, the company, what are some websites out there that you could pass out?
Hostingadvice.com is where you can go to read up on all things hosting advice, of course, and then staying on top of the latest tech trends. And you can find us online at Hosting Advice.
All right. That sounds really good. Thanks for being on the On Your Side podcast, and have a great rest of your evening.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. It's appreciated.
The On Your Side podcast is produced by Brad Denny. Our audio engineer and editor is Todd Martin. Segment producer is Colin Stanton. And I'm Gary Harper.
And I'm Susan Campbell. If you have a problem you can't resolve, maybe we can. Send us a message through azfamily.com or our AZ Family mobile app. Look for the On Your Side section and leave us a message. Thanks so much for listening to the On Your Side podcast. And if you like it, leave us a review. We'll see you next week.
On Your Side is on Good Morning Arizona every weekday morning at 6:45 and 7 o'clock, and every weekday evening on Good Evening Arizona at 4 and 5 o'clock. You can also catch it on Arizona's Family News at 9 on 3TV every weeknight.